Hello everyone. Thank you for joining me to watch this presentation on the Facility Needs Assessment Report for the Monadnock Regional School District elementary schools. Today we will explore future options for the district. I'd like to start by quickly reviewing the worksheets that will be used as the basis for planning future options. The Monadnock Regional School District elementary schools have been studied for building and program needs. These inform what the total cost would be for a particular configuration. As the configuration changes, these worksheets are recalculated and new cost estimates are generated. Every option uses the same method and basic data so as to be able to make fair apples-to-apples comparisons for each option. Potential building aid is then calculated. There are several factors that influence how much aid is given. Those include deduction for previous projects funded in the last 35 years, a cap on the allowable building size, and also a cap on construction costs. The cost of construction is divided into two pieces. Hard costs, which are the actual cost for labor and materials for construction, and soft costs, which include design fees, utility charges, furniture, and many other items not directly part of the building but necessary to complete construction. In 2019, the state lifted the moratorium on school building aid and began funding school construction for projects in the 2019-2020 state budget. The Monadnock Regional School District could qualify for up to 55% building aid with some restrictions. That aid would come in two payments, with 80% paid up front at the start of construction and 20% paid at construction completion. There are restrictions. The state wants to see school buildings built to last, and so will not fund the same school project twice in a 35-year time period. The state will also not fund projects that are unfairly large and therefore limit funding to 120 square feet per student. Lastly, the state will not fund projects that are exceedingly expensive and therefore caps funding to $182 per square foot of construction. This does not mean a school district cannot exceed those limits, but do so at their own expense. Renovations also have funding restrictions. Renovations that do not exceed 25% the replacement value are considered simple maintenance and therefore not eligible. Renovations, however, that exceed 60% are considered a bad investment, and the state encourages districts to then consider new construction. Again, districts can depart from these rules, but doing so risks the building aid that they would otherwise expect to receive. Costs are then calculated for each school for each option. This generates a large amount of data which is intended to show impartiality when comparing different options. There are many costs to consider that are beyond the capital costs for construction. These include building needs, not included in the capital projects, heat and electricity, costs for salaries that are affected by building conditions, and aspects of funding and finance. The result is a comprehensive view of the ongoing costs for each option. This should provide a fair comparison. Each of these are calculated for every option for 10 years to provide enough information to show the true costs without becoming complicated. Let's take a look at each of these areas. The building needs are items from the building analysis but prorated over a 10-year time period to create an improvement plan. This only applies to options where upgrades are not part of a major construction project and instead are part of a maintenance and repair. Only critical highest priority items are included. Small items that are maintenance and repair are accounted for under human resources. The utility costs are essentially heat and electricity. A study of current costs for heat and electricity of all schools in the district show that older buildings cost more than new construction. Renovations help to lower costs, but new construction can be designed for even more energy efficiency. With this information, figures for existing renovations and new are assigned. Existing remains as is, renovations assumes a 20% savings over existing, and new construction can be designed to 20% less than all buildings in the district. The cost of human resources are often overlooked when planning a building. About 90% of the cost for operating an organization is salaries, and by designing to increase efficiencies, we can show savings. Cleaning and maintenance is easier when the layout and materials are specifically designed to lower effort. Repairs are also less with new materials. Busing can represent a large part of operations in a district, especially one as spread out as Monadnock Regional School District. Where we place school buildings can have a dramatic effect on busing costs. Studies have shown a direct connection between facility conditions and student and teacher performance. A study of schools with poor conditions show as much as a 30% higher teacher absenteeism than schools of better condition in the same district. The cost of this can be calculated. It is important to point out, however, that there is also a less tangible effect, such as teacher retention and overall performance. Studies on the quality of lighting and ventilation show conditions can improve teacher performance and thus can help boost student test scores. Financing is the cost of not just the bond, but other income and expenses. Those include such items as tax revenue, building aid, and inflation. The typical funding source for a school project is a 20-year municipal bond. These are paid with the same principal payment each year. This means that the interest amount declines every year of the life of the bond. At the beginning of this year, the New Hampshire Municipal Bond Bank issued bonds with interest rates that were the lowest they have issued in 25 years. It is likely this will stay low for the short term. In options that close a school, it is assumed that the property would be sold to a private developer. If that happens, the increase of property tax revenue from putting the building on the tax rolls would help offset the cost of the bond. There may be other uses more valuable for the town, but this at least shows the benefit. Building aid is currently available for districts that are eligible, but getting aid is competitive. If available, it would substantially help. How it is distributed has changed since the last project the school district received aid for. It is now paid at the beginning of the project, which greatly reduces the cost of the bond. Lastly, inflation needs to be considered. The average inflation, as reported by RS Means Construction Index, is about 3% per year. With the changing economy, this could increase. Right now, it is clear that the increase in cost due to inflation is higher than the interest cost of borrowing. This is likely to stay this way for the near future as well. This study has explored 10 options for future capital improvement projects. This represents a serious attempt to investigate every possibility so that it is clear that the option chosen to move forward with was done in a very thoughtful way. These options are: Option 1, do nothing. This assumes that all elementary schools will stay as it is currently, but will receive only emergency upgrades. It is not a viable option because it does not provide the same level of quality education space that the other options do. This is simply a baseline to show what doing nothing carries a significant cost. Option 2, upgrades over 10 years. This attempts to bring the existing facilities up to new school standards, but with a pay-as-you-go financing. It solves most problems, but it takes 10 years to do this. It may seem like this should be a cost-effective solution, but it is definitely not. Inflation drives up the cost of the upgrades, and until energy improvements are completed, there is no savings for energy. Some needed improvements might not ever get fixed. Option 3, upgrades in 1 year. By combining all the upgrades into a single project and bonding the funds, the district can enjoy the benefits of the improvements immediately. The downside to this option is that some schools have issues that cannot easily be fixed, and some schools might not qualify for building aid. Option 4, new South Elementary and upgrades to the northern schools. This would close Troy and Emerson and build a new school somewhere near the two communities, with additions and renovations to Cutler, Mount Caesar, and Gilsum. There would need to be a new piece of property acquired that is suitable. The new school would provide the best environment for the southern towns, but would also mean much higher busing costs for the southern communities. Option 5, new South Elementary School and Mount Caesar to become a north school, with additions renovations to Gilsum. This is essentially the same as option 4, but with Cutler being closed and those students sent to an expanded Mount Caesar. This solves some problems with the Cutler site that cannot easily be solved. Cutler and Mount Caesar already act as a single elementary school because they each take certain grades. It will likely be more convenient for parents to have one school for Swansea, not further increase cost of busing. Option 6, new consolidated school. This looks at the possibility of closing all the elementary schools and consolidating them into one site. This would likely be the Mount Caesar property since it is large enough and central to the district. However, this has multiple downsides. First, at over 1,000 students, it would be very large and would have negative effects. Schools that size lose the economy of scale because the school becomes too large to effectively manage by one principal. Studies show that elementary schools over 500 students start to have negative effects on education. The increase in traffic would be significant and the cost of busing would be the highest of any other option. This makes this option very expensive. Option 7, New South Elementary and Mount Caesar to North School. This is essentially the same as option 5, but also closing Gilsum makes Monadnock Regional School District a 2 elementary school district. This also assumes that both schools would be designed for the same capacity. That means students would attend the closest school regardless of town lines. This option has a lot of positives due to the new construction and consolidation, but also has some of the negative effects associated with both. New construction is more energy efficient and better for education, but new costs more than renovations, and consolidation means the additional cost of busing. Option 8, New South at Troy and Mount Caesar to North School. This is similar to option 7, but assumes Troy would be rebuilt as the New South School. This is actually very cost effective because it reuses more existing building. It keeps a school in Troy where the population is dense and therefore minimizes some busing. This also means that a new site for the new school is unnecessary. However, Emerson and Fitzwilliam is in reasonably good condition, so closing it does not seem to make sense. Option 9, combine Cutler and Troy to Mount Caesar. This option looks to close the 2 schools which are in the worst condition and combine them with Mount Caesar where there is room to expand. Immediately, however, this has the same issues as option 6, in that the new Mount Caesar would be very large for an elementary school, which would have negative effects. Troy would then be the only town currently with a school to have its schools closed. Option 10, town schools. Keeping a school open in each town has many benefits. It keeps the cost of busing to a minimum. Keeping schools local allows for better parent participation and improves pride in the community. This option closes Cutler and moves those students to Mount Caesar. Cutler has some of the most significant issues, and Mount Caesar already receives all of Swansea students, but just for a few grades before moving to Cutler. Consolidating them would be convenient and better for students to stay in one location longer. Mount Caesar's site and location is ideal for expansion. The other schools, Gilsum, Troy, and Emerson, would receive additions and renovations to bring them to a similar level of quality as Mount Caesar. We are now ready to review the cost for each option. Capital costs or total project construction costs range considerably depending on the project. The first 2 options are pay-as-you-go and therefore have no real capital cost, but we will see that this does affect the yearly cost option and life cycle analysis. The most expensive is understandably the all-new consolidated school. The projects with renovations are more cost-effective since they reuse existing space. State aid is the amount that the state will give the district for each option. This amount is roughly the same for every option, varying only a little from high to low. The reason for this is because of the state-imposed caps on funding. This formula unintentionally favors renovation for buildings that have received building aid in the past. Life cycle cost takes all the previous factors and calculates the cost to the district for each year for 10 years. What is surprising is that the 2 most expensive options are the pay-as-you-go and the new consolidated school option. These represent the exact opposite approach, with one being all renovations and the other all new. It shows that the cost not directly related to construction but impacted by construction can have significant influences on the ultimate cost. Each option has very different positive and negative aspects and very different costs as well. Be aware, although the totals are in the millions of dollars, the yearly cost difference between options represents a small percentage of the district's operating budget. Option 1 shows that there's a significant cost for doing nothing at all. All of the Monadnock Regional School District elementary schools have some building and program needs, with some that are more significant than others. Studies on facility conditions has shown that impact on student-teacher performance happens when conditions are poor. Each option deals with needs slightly differently, but one bring the quality levels to a similar amount. There are many factors that we need to weigh before selecting a route to take. Capital costs, which are only about 8% of the total cost of a district budget, so although important, not the most important factor. State building aid. From Monadnock Regional School District, this aid is essential. It is not guaranteed, but we should be ready to accept it if available. Cost of operations and maintenance, which can greatly change the real cost of a project. Busing costs, which are often ignored but could cost as much as the bond itself. Land availability, the difficulty in finding a suitable property is underappreciated. Educational quality, studies show that improved facilities improves student performance. And community use and support. Small local schools provide many positive benefits to towns they serve. Monadnock Regional School District has a history of member towns defending and supporting their schools. The situation created by the coronavirus pandemic may make it seem like the worst time to move a building proposal forward. However, the low bond rates combined with low inflation create a unique, favorable time to build. That concludes this study of the Monadnock Regional School District elementary schools. I hope you enjoyed the presentation.